Our story, Part 10, The Jar and the Eggs. Now that we finally had a building in downtown Salt Lake City, Sunday morning services could begin. And I need to say something important here. As I tell this story, it would be easy for it to sound like I am telling about all the great things I did. That is not true. The story is not about the great things I did. It is about the great things Jesus did with a group of misfits who were willing to follow him. And we really were a group of misfits. Many of us did not feel like the kind of people who could just walk into a normal church and fit right in. We were not polished. We were not impressive. We did not have everything figured out. But God was doing something among us. We were not just trying to build a church. We were becoming a family. A group of people learning to love one another, walk through life together, and not simply write each other off when things got difficult. We wanted to be the kind of people who stayed, forgave, helped, prayed, and kept going. That was not always easy. People are messy. Church is messy. I was messy, but Jesus was at work. Early on, God had given me promises that he would use my life, not because of me, most of the time, probably in spite of me. But he made it clear that if I would follow him, obey him, and guard what he had placed in my hands, he would do things I could never do on my own. Let me tell you one of those stories. This was years before Salt Lake City. I was still a fairly new Christian, maybe 5 or 6 years in the Lord. I had not planted any churches yet. I was just beginning to go to Bible college, learning how to study the Bible, and trying to figure out what it meant to follow Jesus. At the time, I was working in downtown Sacramento. Not far from where I worked, there was an old stone chapel. It was small, cold, quiet, and beautiful in its own way. It felt like one of those old pioneer chapels from another time. Once a week, during my lunch hour, I would go there to pray. I used to think of it as my appointment with God. That may sound simple, but to me, it became important. I would walk over, sit in that little chapel, open my heart to the Lord, pray, and listen. One day, I was standing in a deli with a friend during lunch hour. We were about to eat when I remembered something. This was my time to go to the chapel. I tried to ignore it, but I could not shake it. Finally, I told my friend, "I'm sorry, but I have another appointment I really should not break." So I left the deli and walked over to the chapel. Now, I wish I could say my heart was perfectly humble. It was not. I remember sitting there in that cold little stone chapel thinking, "Lord, look how obedient I am. I even canceled lunch to come spend time with you." That is not exactly the prayer of a broken man. There was still plenty of pride in me, but in spite of that, God met me there. As I began to pray, I had my eyes closed and my head bowed. Then suddenly, it was almost as if my eyes were open, even though they were still closed. I saw something in my lap. It was a jar. Not a modern jar, but an old clay jar, the kind you might imagine from Bible times. Something like the jars connected with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and my hand was inside the jar. When I saw it, I panicked. I pulled my hand out quickly, and when I did, the top of the jar broke. Then it disappeared. I opened my eyes, startled and confused. I thought, "Lord, what was that? What are you doing? I do not understand this at all." Honestly, because of my old life and all the drugs I had done, my first thought was, am I having some kind of mental meltdown? I did not know what was happening. Then I sensed that still, small voice of the Lord speaking to my heart. "Calm down." So I tried to calm down. Then I sensed him say, "Look again." I closed my eyes again and looked down. There was the jar again. But this time, because the top had been broken off, I could see inside it. Inside the jar were eggs. Then it disappeared again. I sat there, trying to understand what I had just seen. "Lord, what is this? I do not understand." And I sensed the Lord say, "Did you see the eggs?" I said, "Yes, Lord, I saw them." Then I sensed him impress this on my heart. Those eggs are the promises I have given you. They are real, but they are fragile. You must take care of them." That went deep into me. The Lord was showing me that He had placed promises in my life, but I could not treat them carelessly. I needed to guard my walk with Him. I needed to guard my integrity. I needed to guard my mind. I needed to be careful about what I allowed into my life, what I looked at, what I listened to, what I fed my heart with, and how I lived when no one else was watching. Those promises were not toys. They were not trophies. They were fragile things entrusted to me by God. And if I was careless, I could damage what He had placed in my hands. That moment stayed with me for the rest of my life. God was not telling me that I had to be perfect before He could use me. If that were the case, He could never have used me at all. But He was telling me to walk carefully, to walk honestly, to walk in integrity, to remember that calling is not something to show off. It is something to steward. Years later, when we were in Salt Lake City and God began gathering people around us, that lesson mattered more than ever. We were not just organizing services. We were shepherding people. We were becoming a family. And family has to be handled with care. People can be fragile too. Their trust can be fragile. Their hearts can be fragile. Their stories can be fragile. The work God was doing among us was precious, but it needed to be guarded with humility, integrity, and love. I did not always do that perfectly. I made mistakes, but I never forgot the jar, and I never forgot the eggs. God had given promises, and by His grace, I wanted to carry them carefully